Hello everyone, peace be upon you all. I hope you all are doing well. Welcome back. If you have been watching, if not, welcome to you. Everyone gets an equal welcome, whether you have been here before or not. So everyone gets an equal welcome. I hope you all are doing well. This is the Islam nobody told you about. We have another discussion today. So before anything, I was asked if I would be doing anything if I would be doing a video for Mawlid, which is the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Since we're in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, in which the Prophet was born, I didn't have any plan to do any video on that. I don't believe that celebrating Mawlidun Nabawi al-Sharif is the noble birthday of the Prophet Muhammad is a bid'ah, is an innovation. I don't believe that it's a sin. I don't believe that. I think it's more about what people do in it. So I won't be doing a video on it, but I can just quickly right now just tell you what I think about it and leave it there. So Mawlid, the Prophet was born on Mawlid. People, in my understanding, it was something that was introduced to celebrate the Prophet's birthday, I don't know, maybe about 700 years ago or so. And so what happens is that people, they celebrate it, and people have different ways of celebrating it. So some people, I've heard of people going to extremes when celebrating it. Like certain Sufi groups will go as far as to have a chair that they leave empty, thinking that chair is for the Prophet. They just weird things. When it comes to those things which are considered, which are innovations in Islam, someone will always take it to another level and do a bunch of stupid things when it comes to that innovation. There's nothing wrong with a good innovation, bid'atun hasanah, but some people take things to a crazy level. In my view, Mawlid, to celebrate the Prophet's birthday, if someone, reads the Quran or invites people, for food and to discuss the life of the Prophet or to discuss something related to the religion of Islam, there's nothing wrong with that. If someone wants to recite poetry about the Prophet Muhammad, there's nothing wrong with that. If someone wants to, hold some kind of occasion, there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, these types of things should happen all the time anyway. But if someone wanted to designate a day, i.e. the Prophet's birthday, for such an event, there's nothing wrong with that. So and you never know, someone who's not a Muslim might come and might become a Muslim, or someone who is not that religious might come and decide to become more practicing. So there are benefits in Mawlidun Nabawi, as long as people aren't doing things which go against the Quran, doing things which involve polytheism, doing things which are wrong. This is all that matters. Usually people who get involved with things that go too far are the Sufis. In my understanding, the Sufis and the 12er Shiites, they end up going into the 12er Shia, they end up going to extremes that they invented themselves, and then justified and made up, a defense about. I'm not going to stay quiet about people that I've seen do stupid things, and then try to tie the religion to them, and then try to make you look wrong for not agreeing with them. Zaydi Shia, by the way, are Shia. Zaydis are Shia, and 12er Shia are Shia. So you can see that the Shia can't call a Zaydi a Salafi, or they use the term Wahhabi. They can't say that to a Zaydi, because Zaydis have their issues with 12er Shia. So a 12er Shi'i cannot attack a Zaydi saying, oh, you're a Wahhabi. Wahhabis, you're a Salafi, trying to, because the Salafis usually are the ones who pick on these kinds of people like Shia. So they can't do that with the Zaydis, because the Zaydis are Shia. So, what name are you going to call him? What name do you have for him? So, in any case, as long as you don't do anything stupid, then it should all be okay. Everything should be fine. In any case, so we left off talking about the verse which discusses God having a shin. Specifically speaking, it was the verse which is on that bad after I seek refuge with God from the accursed Satan. We say that before we recite the Quran. There are different views about whether you have to do it or not. I choose to do it. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Before anything, I believe of course I believe. I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I praise and I glorify him as he ought to be praised and glorified. So we left off talking about the verse, on that day the shin will be uncovered. Yukshafu an saq, Quran 68:42. And we discussed the interpretation of that verse, that it's not a literal interpretation. Today, we're going to be continuing our refutation of the corporealists, the mujassimah, those who say that Allah, God, has a physical body. We're going to be continuing with that. So we start our commentary with the commentary. So these are the words of the commentators. Regarding the exegesis, meaning the interpretation of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, upon them be peace, it is in agreement with the aforementioned interpretation forwarded by Ibn Abbas. The interpretation was that it means that the moment or the day of judgment, it talks, the interpretation of the shin being, the interpretation of the shin being uncovered. I want to use the wording that they used in the book. The shin being uncovered. This means the intensity of the day of judgment, or the moment that things become intense on the day of judgment for the disbelievers, if I remember correctly. So the interpretation of Ahlul Bayt meaning anyone descending. Ahlul Bayt literally means family of the house. In this case, in the case of the Zaydis and many others, it's referring to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, Ali, Fatima, Hassan and Hussein, peace and blessings be upon them as well, and their descendants. Those are Ahlul Bayt. So that's who it's referring to. Specifically, most specifically, the Prophet, his daughter Fatima, Ali, Hassan, and Hussein. This is Ahlul Bayt. I am of the belief that the wives are part of Ahlul Bayt. We'll talk more about that when we get towards the end, when we talk about Imamat. We'll talk about that when we get to that section. So, one example is the statement of Imam al-Hadi. So the Ahlul Bayt are in agreement with what Ibn Abbas said. Ibn Abbas, some say even he is part of Ahlul Bayt, by the way. There are narrations which say that Ibn Abbas is part of Ahlul Bayt because he was a descendant of Al-Abbas. He was the son of Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, who was the uncle of the Prophet. So some people have interpreted those who are Ahlul Bayt to refer to those that sadaqah cannot be given to. Charity cannot be given to them. Why? I don't know. But why can't charity be given to them? I don't know. That's what the narration says. It's always good to go by what the Quran says, because if you don't go by what the Quran says, you end up getting, in a kind of situation that's not, that's problematic. We'll deal with that, God willing, when we get to Imamah. So, one example is the statement of Imam al-Hadi, an example of them affirming that it refers to in the intensity. Imam al-Hadi, meaning Imam al-Hadi, who wrote the book, the original book that they're commentating on. He's not Imam al-Hadi, who is I believe he is considered to be the 10th or 11th Imam in the 12er Shi'i school. And in the Zaydi school, Imam al-Hadi was someone who existed, I don't know how much later, but he was someone else. He was someone else. Imam al-Hadi ila al-Haq. he was a Hassani. He was a descendant of Imam al-Hasan. That the other Imam al-Hadi, peace be upon him, was a descendant of Imam al-Hussein. So anyway, this was a Zaydi Imam, this one that we're talking about right now. So one example is the statement of Imam al-Hadi, upon him be peace, in his kitab Baligh al-Mudarik, in his book Baligh al-Mudarik. Kitab means book, but the book may be called Kitab Baligh al-Mudarik. He says, on that day the shin will be uncovered. This means intensity. It is as what is said, the war has become intensified for us. So you see, they use language. They use language, and they use any poetry, they use and any metaphors that are known in the Arabic language to interpret the Quran, which is completely permissible. If anything, it's obligatory. How are you supposed to understand the Arabic language if you don't understand its metaphors which are used in the Quran? Third, regarding the hadith. Hadith means narration. Narrations by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. It could also refer to other narrations as well, but usually it refers to hadith of the Prophet. Third, regarding the hadith that the corporealists narrate in support of their view, of their own view, we say that it is inauthentic, the narration. There are various things mentioned in this narration that contradict reason, the book of God, the authentic sunnah. Sunnah means the prophetic tradition, or whatever comes from books which are extra Quranic. They're not the Quran. They're books which are not the Quran, but they're written by scholars which contain narrations in them, kind of like newspapers. I'm just trying to help you understand what they are. So there are various things mentioned in this narration, which we will see, by the way, that contradict reason, the book of God, the authentic sunnah, the authentic prophetic tradition, sunnah of the Prophet, and the consensus of the Muslims. For example, the same narration mentioned that God will appear to the believers and hypocrites in a form that they do not recognize. The same narration mentions that God will appear in a form that the hypocrites and the believers do not recognize. We will discuss this narration in detail in our discussion entitled The Vision of Allah. That, I believe, means ru'ya. The ru'ya. Ru'ya means seeing God, the seeing of God. Will it happen or will it not happen? There are people who believe that God will be seen on the Day of Judgment in one way or another. Perceived, but they call it seeing him. But they mean perceiving him. Or seeing him literally. If I'm not mistaken, that might apply to the Salafis. I'm not sure. But the Ash'aris say that they will not see him like with the naked eye, like God has a physical form. They say it's another kind of perception. We don't accept that. Mu'tazila, Zaydis, Ibadis, we don't accept that there's Khawarij. We all did not accept that. Shia, 12 or Shia, we don't accept that God will ever be seen. So what is this narration? So for example, so what is this narration? We'll get to it. We're on our way to it. Nevertheless, it suffices for us that the hadith that mentions the literal uncovering of the shin is inauthentic due to the numerous authentic reports to the contrary. For example, when Ibn Abbas was asked regarding the verse, he did not reply by saying that the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, said that God will bare his shin, meaning that God will expose his shin. Ibn Abbas didn't reply by saying, oh yes, that narration, yeah, the Prophet told us such and such. He didn't reply with a hadith. If this hadith was authentic, if this narration was authentic and stated in the presence of the companions, Ibn Abbas and others amongst the Salaf, the early Muslims, would have responded with this narration. They would not have responded with a metaphor. They would have responded with a narration, but they did not. The corporealists, the Mujassima, the Salafis, modern day Salafis. In the past, they were called corporealists, Mujassima, Hashwiyah. They had names that others gave to them. The corporealists also quote some narrations of hadith, some narrations of narrations, to substantiate their claim that God consists of a body. Since there are many such narrations, we will confine ourselves to just one of them. It is a narration in Sahih al-Bukhari on the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, in which he said, and I could have brought this narration in Arabic. I felt that it would not be necessary, but there are different wordings that I have seen. But I felt it would not be necessary, so I just said, I said to myself, this book, what's in it suffices. There's no need to bring it in Arabic. This is an English discussion anyway, so there was no need. But I could have. I was recommended to do so, or not recommended, but rather they were shared with me, and someone wanted me to apply them to the video. But when I printed one of them out, when I saw one of them, I didn't take a good look at it. It was another wording. So the wording didn't match this one. The narration I'm about to narrate is in Bukhari, but there are other wordings. So it's just it's when you get to hadith literature, you run into things. You're gonna see what I'm talking about here. Let's laugh together. Or it's a funny matter, but funny as in like how stupid people can be to believe things. Let's read, so we can see what's going on here. It is a narration in Sahih al-Bukhari on the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may God be pleased with him, in which he said, a Jew, and in other narrations, a rabbi from amongst the Jews, and a man from the people of the book in other narrations. That's in brackets. But here it says, a Jew came to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, and said, O Muhammad, we find that God holds the heavens on one finger, the earth on one finger, the mountains on one finger, the trees on one finger, and the rest of creation on one finger. He will say, I am the king. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, laughed until his molars showed, confirming what he said. It's in bold. Confirming what he said. Confirming what the Jewish man said. He then recited, the Prophet, they have not made for God a just appraisal. Meaning they have not given God his due not his due description, but his due characteristic per se. Rather. His due, they have not done him justice. Quran 39:67. They have not made for God a just appraisal. Quran 39:67. They say that this narration affirms that God is a body, because the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, is said to have affirmed what the rabbi said by laughing. We say that this narration does not prove the corporeality of God for the following reasons. First, the apparent import of this narration is contradicted by the clear and explicit verses of the Quran that deny the corporeality. So first, the Quran, it contradicts the Quran. We brought up verses in the previous videos discussing how corporeality cannot be the case, cannot be real. Corporeality is not a reality. So first, it contradicts the Quran. Second, in the Fath al-Bari was a book written by a man by the name of Ibn al-Hajar al-Asqalani. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and he wrote a commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. So Sahih al-Bukhari is a compilation of narrations by al-Bukhari, a scholar by the name of al-Bukhari. And later in time, I don't know how much later, there was a man by the name of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani who wrote a book called Fath al-Bari, which was a commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari, where he explains and gives his commentary. So secondly, Ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari, Ibn Hajar recognizes that the phrase confirming what he said, meaning the Prophet laughed, confirming what he said, is additional wording. Ibn Hajar says it's additional wording. That is not part of the hadith. It's not part of the narration, but rather the statement of a sub-narrator. A sub-narrator was the one who added that. And third, in the hadith itself, the Prophet quotes the verse, "They have not made for God a just appraisal." A just appraisal, which clearly contradicted what the rabbi said and censured him. It contradicted what the rabbi said and rebuked the rabbi. It proved him wrong. It basically rebuked him. It censured him. It put him in the wrong. So as I told you earlier on, this book is not limited to Shi'i sources. That was what I was implying. That was the implication. There are other sources that are used. So we're using Bukhari to see what has been mentioned. We're using Fathul Bari. We've used Dur al-Manthur, Imam al-Tabari's tafsir. We've mentioned Al-Bayhaqi's Al-Asma'u was-Sifat. These are Sunni sources, not Shi'i. Furthermore, we narrate the same narration from the book ينابع النصيحة في العقيدة الصحيحة. I believe the title is actually في العقائد الصحيحة. That's what I found. But it says here ينابع النصيحة في عقيدة الصحيحة. في العقيدة الصحيحة. في العقيدة الصحيحة. Excuse me. ينابع النصيحة في العقيدة الصحيحة. I found في العقائد الصحيحة, but it's okay. Maybe it is في العقيدة الصحيحة. I don't know, but it's the same author though. So if he wrote two books, I don't know. But it's by Amir Badruddin ibn al-Husayn. Amir Badruddin ibn al-Husayn. This is a Zaydi Shi'i source, if I'm not mistaken. Compare this narration to the narration above. So they're saying, the commentators, compare this narration with the narration above. This is a Shi'i narration, a Zaydi narration. And see which is more probable. He reported, Badruddin, the author, "It is narrated on the authority of Ali, upon him be peace, that some Jews came to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, and said, 'Describe your Lord to us.' The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, became silent, because he was amazed at what they said, and because he wanted to wait until the command of God came." He wanted to wait until the command of God came. They then said, we meaning the Jews, "we describe our Lord with greatness. Our Lord God holds the heavens on his finger on the day of judgment, as well as the seas on one finger, the rest of things on one finger. His other hand is free. He," i.e. the Prophet, "belied them," meaning he refuted them. He belied them, and then it doesn't mean he lied to them. It means he refuted them, he rejected them. He belied them, and then God revealed the verse, "They have not made for God a just appraisal," i.e. they did not magnify him in what he is deserving to be magnified. They did not give God his due characteristic, which is that God has no body. "The whole earth will be in his grasp on the day of judgment." This means his dominion. His dominion. The earth is always under his dominion. The whole earth will be in his grasp on the day of judgment. This means his dominion. "The heavens will be folded in his right hand." This refers to his rule. His rule. "He is glorified and exalted above all of what they say," i.e. this refers to describing him with limbs and imagery. If you go to the Bible, that's the end of the narration, by the way. If you go to the Bible, you will find that forgive me, I live in California, so there are earthquakes all the time. I'm just joking. So, if you go to the Bible, you will find that God is always compared to people. He has feelings, as in like, God felt this way, so he did this, or things like that. So God is compared to creation. In the Quran, yes, it's mentioned, there are what one would read and interpret literally, but that's not what they mean. So in the Bible, it's either metaphorical, what's mentioned, or it's what people have made up themselves. It's what people have made up on their own. So it's either a metaphor or it's something that people have made up by themselves and introduced to the Bible, introduced to a book of God. So this narration, to me, the Zaydi narration, appears more sound. The other narration looks to me like one of the narrations of the children of Israel, which have entered the books of Islam, unfortunately. Words of the children of Israel, the children of Israel, unfortunately, many of them used to make up lies. They used to write something and then say God said it. This is something they used to do. That's one of the reasons why we refute the Bible. This is one of our issues with the Bible. So what happened is that they would do those things, and that ended up and many of those lies and tales ended up in our books. That happened. That's why a lot of hadith cannot be trusted. They have to agree with the Quran. They have to agree with intellect. They can't just agree with a chain of narration. How do you know the chain of narration was not invented? The chain of narration meaning so-and-so heard from so-and-so, heard from so-and-so. All of these so-and-sos are good people, trustworthy people. Therefore, the narration is a trustworthy narration. How do you know? Because the main so-and-so, the author of the book, was a righteous man himself. How do you know it wasn't fabricated against him? They don't think. This narration is a lot more acceptable because it presents the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and his progeny as not laughing and seemingly agreeing with the corporeality of his inquisitors, but rather belying them and countering their claim with an explicit verse of the Quran. Any other narration that attributes body parts to God must either be rejected or as false, or interpreted to fit the understanding that we have previously presented. So either it's done away with as false, or we take it as we have previously presented, meaning with interpretation. It cannot be that God has a physical body. Nothing contains God. My hands are holding this book, which is contained by this vehicle. But Sammy, you're holding it. Yeah, but it's still inside this vehicle. It's inside something. I'm inside something. I'm inside this earth. I'm inside this universe. We are inside this universe. You're watching this video inside something. Everything is limited by something. Every body, separate words. Every body is contained by something. There's no body which is not contained by anything. Where was God before he created the earth and created space and time? Where? If someone wants to say, but what about, maybe he laughed because he was laughing at what they believe in. I mean, maybe he laughed because he laughed at what they believe in like laughing, maybe laughing as in like shaking his head, like, what do you guys believe in? Fingers and God has, maybe, but the fact of the matter is that God does not have a physical body. So anyway, we'll end it there. The next the next subject that we will be discussing is corporeality and the use of interpretation, ta'wil. For anyone who's Deobandi or from the people of Tafweed who reject interpreting the Quran using interpretation, like saying that the hand of God means the power of God, or interpreting other verses of the Quran, you want to watch the following video. And also for everyone out there, because now we're going to discuss in the following video interpretation. Can we interpret verses? Or if we see a verse that we don't understand and we cannot explain right away because we don't have knowledge, because the verse is allegorical, it's not literal, it's allegorical, so we just leave it alone. That's called tafweed, referring the matter, just refer it to God. We don't know what it means. We'll just pass over it. You will see that we are forced to do it. Now, I don't know if the Deobandi brothers and sisters, or if the people of Tafweed, if they absolutely don't interpret anything, absolutely 100%, but they generally don't interpret. They say we just read over it. We accept what it says, but we don't say it's a real hand. We don't say it's a real face. We don't say it's a real body. We don't say any of that. We just read it and we pass it. We refer it to God. So that's you will see how every Muslim or everyone who reads the Quran is forced to interpret, and you will learn why interpretation is necessary. Interpreting verses which are not clear to understand, which are not that obvious or clear to understand. On the next episode, before that time or until that time, during that time, and after that time, keep safe. Take care of yourselves. I wish you all the best. God bless you. And I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. Peace be with you.